She smiled at his boots standing just outside the cafe, their polished leather reflecting the warm sunlight. Emma loved coffee, especially in the morning, and this little spot on the corner was her favorite. It had an inviting charm that felt like home. As she took a sip of her cappuccino, her eyes drifted to the man who owned those boots. Owen, the man with the boots, was a regular. He had this quiet way about him that intrigued Emma. He always sat at the same table, scribbling in a notebook, lost in a world that only he could see. Today he had on a dark jacket that complemented those boots perfectly. She wondered what stories he hid beneath that serious exterior. But she was too shy to approach him, too hesitant to break the barrier of silence that hung between them like a thick fog. As the days passed, she saw him more often. Their stolen glances turned into almost friendly smiles. Each time she looked over, he would catch her eye, and a small, understanding smile would dance across his lips. It felt electric, just that flicker of connection made her feel warm inside. Emma was often lost in her thoughts, but this brief encounter made her heart race. Could he feel it too? One rainy afternoon, Emma decided to brave the storm and make her way to the cafe. The gentle sound of rain tapping against the window created a rhythm that soothed her soul. As she entered, she noticed Owen by his usual table, his notebook open, the words flowing from his pen. The smudge of ink on his fingers only added to his allure. Today she felt bolder. She took her drink, approached his table, and smiled. She asked softly, her heart pounding. He looked up, surprised. "No, please," he replied, flashing that warm smile that made her breath hitch. She sat down, sipping her drink, trying to think of something to say, but the words felt tangled in her throat. Emma finally ventured. Owen nodded, brushing a piece of hair from his forehead. "Yeah, perfect for writing," he replied. The conversation felt long and stretched between them, both searching for something to hold on to. Emma learned that Owen was a writer passionate about stories. He spoke with such passion that it drew her in. They shared laughs, and with each moment the tension melted. The rain continued to pour outside, but inside it felt warm and filled with possibilities. As the weeks rolled on, they became friends. Their daily conversations turned deeper, revealing bits of their lives, hopes, and dreams. Emma found herself waiting for each day to see Owen, feeling excitement bubble inside her. But with every smile shared, she sensed a weight on his shoulders. There were stories he wasn't telling, wounds healing beneath the surface. Then one evening, while leaving the cafe, she caught a glimpse of his notebook left behind on the table. Temptation tugged at her. Should she look? It felt wrong, yet she couldn't shake her curiosity. She couldn't resist the urge to discover more about the man who had enchanted her. Gingerly, she opened the notebook. The first few pages were filled with scribbles, snippets of thoughts, and words that danced off the page with raw energy. Then she found a printed email tucked between the pages, a personal email from someone named Lisa. Heart racing, her breaths quickened as she scanned the words. The email was dated just a few weeks back and was filled with emotion. The sender, Lisa, revealed that she had hoped Owen would join her on a trip. They had planned a trip to heal their relationship, but his response was stark. He could not go. He needed space. There was a haunting sadness in those words, a past that weighed heavily on him. Emma's heart sank. This was the story he hadn't shared. She could almost feel the pain radiating from the page, a strong reminder that sometimes smiles hide the heaviest burdens. Her mind raced, absorbing everything. She suddenly felt entangled in a fabric of emotions that weren't hers to bear but were undeniably real. It felt wrong to pry, but she couldn't resist the pull. Why didn't he ever mention Lisa? What happened between them that made him avoid her name? She felt desperation creeping in, a burning urge to understand him, to be there for him. But how could she when he hadn't let her in? The next day, Emma arrived early at the cafe, her heart heavy. She wanted to talk to Owen, to tell him she understood. But how could she approach the subject delicately? She couldn't bring herself to betray his trust by mentioning what she found. Owen walked in looking more serious than usual. He spotted her and gave a small smile, yet it didn't reach his eyes. She waved him over, determined to learn more, but swallowed her words as he sat down. She asked, though inside she yearned to dive deeper. "It was okay," he replied, glancing around, distracted. They sat in silence, the tension palpable. Emma's heart thudded, the unspoken words swirling between them. She couldn't bear it any longer. "Owen," she began, her voice soft, but his attention seemed distant. "You seem a bit off." He looked at her, his brow furrowing, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his features. "Yeah, just some personal stuff," he confessed, his eyes searching hers. But she was worried. That email weighed on her mind, a gnawing thought that perhaps he needed someone to lean on. "You know you can talk to me, right?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated, Emma, She felt a pang of urgency, something deep within her urging her to take a step further. She ventured, feeling her heart race. His eyes widened in surprise, shadowed with something darker fear. "Perhaps. You shouldn't have done that," he replied sharply, his voice low. "I'm sorry," she rushed, panic creeping into her words. "But I care about you, Owen." He looked away, the weight of those unspoken emotions heavy in the air. She reached out, placing a hand on his. "Please." His gaze met hers, vulnerability surfacing in those deep eyes. The silence stretched, thick with uncertainty and possibility. Finally, he sighed heavily. "It's about Lisa. We were together for a long time, but fell apart. I guess I thought I could just move on without dealing with it. She felt a rush of empathy, the pain he felt echoing in her heart. I can only imagine how hard that must be for you, she said softly, squeezing his hand gently, but holding it inside isn't going to help. He stared at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. No one had ever really asked him how he felt, listened without judgment. I guess I'm scared, he finally admitted. Emma nodded, her heart aching for him. That's okay, it's a process. For the first time in days, a small smile broke through the clouds hovering over Owen's face. Thank you, Emma, but there was still so much to say. The air between them shifted, infused with warmth and understanding. This moment felt significant, but also fragile, like the first budding flower in spring. As they continued talking, the cafe buzzed around them, but they remained lost in their world. Emma felt a new connection, a bond forged from honesty and vulnerability. Owen unwrapped his past slowly, sharing memories that had haunted him, moments of joy that darkened into shadows. With each story he told, he seemed to shed a layer of his pain. Emma listened intently, offering words of comfort when needed, allowing him the space to be real. It felt like a dance. They moved through laughter and tears, sharing the weight of their experiences. Eventually, they folded into comfortable silence. The cafe around them bustled, but their little bubble felt safe, protected. For the first time, Emma realized that her feelings for Owen had blossomed into something deeper than friendship. It scared her, yet a piece of her felt alive in his presence. Then, in a moment that felt suspended in time, Owen leaned forward. Emma, he said softly, vulnerability etched into his features. I never expected you to understand, and I want you to know I'm here, she offered earnestly, her heart hoping for more. His eyes searched hers, and for an instant, the world around them faded away. Thank you, he whispered, and there was a spark, an unspoken recognition between them. As they finished their coffee, laughter echoing in every lingering moment, Emma felt a weight lift from Owen's shoulders. It felt like a new beginning unfolding, and with each word exchanged, they stepped into a possibility that was bright and unclear, yet full of hope. It was in this moment, standing side by side with Owen, that Emma realized they were both beginning to heal. She smiled, looking down at his boots once more, the boots that had drawn her in, now symbolizing not just the man, but the journey ahead. Together, they would find their way, one step at a time. She smiled at his boots, the glint of polished leather catching the sunlight like a secret waiting to be uncovered. It was a typical Tuesday morning at Clara's cafe, yet everything felt different that day. The familiar scent of roasted coffee beans filled the air, mingling with the sweet aroma of cinnamon rolls, but Clara's attention was firmly fixed on the man at the corner table. He was new, a tall figure with tousled dark hair, absorbed in scribbling in a weathered notebook. The cafe buzzed with chatter and laughter, but time seemed to slow around him. There was an unspoken magnetism in the way he tucked his chin down as he wrote, as if the world outside didn't exist. His boots, sturdy and worn, spoke of journeys taken, of adventures precisely untold. Every fiber of Clara's being urged her to find out more about him. As the minutes passed, she contemplated whether to approach. It was always easier to stay in her own bubble, but something deep within her stirred, an urge that was hard to ignore. The cafe, a second home to her, felt more like a stage, and she was stuck watching the performance from the sidelines. Suddenly, as if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, a flash of surprise, followed by a soft smile that ignited something deep inside her. Time snapped back to reality, but it was a different kind of reality, one that felt charged, alive. She quickly broke eye contact, cheeks warming as she returned to her work, but the encounter lingered in her mind like a familiar song stuck on repeat. Over the next few weeks, he became a consistent presence at Clara's. His name, she learned, was David, a fact that drifted into her ears as she eavesdropped on the barista while she prepared her usual pumpkin spice latte. It thrilled her to have a name to the face that sparked such intrigue. David never sat with anyone, always alone, but he appeared comfortable in his solitude. They exchanged fleeting smiles, tiny moments filled with potential, but Clara never crossed that line. Fear held her back, even though she sensed that he was as fascinated by her as she was by him. One chilly morning, Clara opened the cafe earlier than usual, eager to prepare for the day ahead. The soft hum of the espresso machine was a familiar comfort. As she wiped down the counter, the bell above the door jingled, signaling David's entrance. His expression held a mixture of surprise and delight as he spotted her. He joked, shaking off the cold from his coat. More like an early bird needs coffee, Clara replied, her heart racing as she served him his usual order. Their conversation flowed easily, each moment an invitation to deepen their connection. The two found common ground in music, books, and the little quirks of life. Every shared laugh felt like a thread tying them closer together. Clara realized she was no longer just an observer in her own life. She was a participant, weaving a beautiful story with someone special. Then a week later, Clara experienced an unexpected turn of events. David arrived looking agitated. He ordered his drink with a distracted tone, his eyes dark and stormy. Clara watched him carefully, the concern bubbling up inside her. She ventured, leaning in slightly. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. He hesitated as if the words were heavy stones in his throat. I received some news. Clara's heart sank. She noticed a flicker of pain in his eyes. I'm really sorry to hear that. He shook his head, eyes clouded with thoughts that seemed too burdensome to share. Not today. As he turned to sit down, Clara's heart clenched at the sight of him in distress. She wished she could reach out, but he seemed far away, wrapped in a cocoon of his own emotions. Later that evening, she was tidying up the cafe when her gaze landed on his table. The notebook lay open, pages fluttering with the breeze from the door. A surge of curiosity washed over her. She knelt beside his chair, picking it up cautiously, fingers brushing against the worn cover. In a moment of weakness, she flipped it open. A mess of thoughts spilled across the pages, fragments of stories yet to be told. Mixed within were sketches of faces and verses of poetry, each word laced with emotion. But then something caught her eye, a printed email tucked snug between the pages. Clara hesitated, guilt creeping in like a shadow, but something compelled her. She unfolded the email, her eyes scanning the words quickly. It was dated a few days back and addressed to David from someone named Sarah. Hey David, I hope you're doing okay. I know things have been rough with your dad. I wanted to let you know I'm here for you. You don't have to go through this alone. The email echoed through her mind, heavy with unspoken baggage. Clara felt a rush of empathy like a wave crashing over her. She put the email down, her heart pounding. Torn between respect for his privacy and a deep desire to understand what he was going through, Clara sat back, the information swirling in her mind. How long had he been dealing with this pain? What kind of relationship did he have with this Sarah? Clara felt a mixture of sadness and a strange protectiveness toward David. He was grappling with emotions too deep to surface amidst the daily bustle of life, and she wished desperately for him to lean on her if only just a little. The next morning, Clara arrived early, determined to talk to him. She was going to break the barrier that kept them apart, no matter how shaky her steps felt. The cafe hummed with the early morning crowd, and Clara's stomach fluttered nervously. She spotted David in the corner, arms folded, staring vacantly into his coffee. She asked, heart racing. He looked up surprised, but a smile slowly crept onto his face. As they settled into conversation, Clara could see the weight still lingering in his eyes, a storm brewing beneath the surface. She decided to take a deep breath and let her feelings guide her words. David, I have to be honest, Clara began, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. I saw the email in your notebook. He stiffened, surprise etched across his face. You shouldn't have done that, Clara, he replied, his voice low. It was a fragile thing holding so much unsaid. I know, she insisted, her eyes searching his, but I care. He leaned back, his expression softening. It's complicated, he admitted, glancing down at the table as if it held all the answers. My father and I. We have a rocky history. I can't imagine how hard that must be, she replied gently. His gaze met hers, vulnerability blooming in those deep pools of emotion. Honestly, I don't know. Clara nodded, her heart aching for him. It's okay to feel that way. Every moment felt electric, the connection thickening like a charged atmosphere before a storm. He was allowing her in, and she could sense the very first cracks forming in his guard. I've avoided talking to Sarah, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to go home. Maybe it doesn't have to be, Clara suggested, her desire to help sharp and clear. Sometimes, facing what hurts can lead to healing. He looked at her with something unreadable in his eyes, a mix of relief and reluctance. The moment was palpable. Every word felt like it carried weight, forging new paths between them. Clara reached out, placing her hand on his. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes, a promise that she was willing to be there for him through the chaos and uncertainty. You don't have to sort everything out alone, she reminded him. Tears glistened in his eyes, the dam holding back his emotions close to breaking. Absolutely, she replied firmly. That small exchange ignited a spark inside them both. It felt like they were inching closer to something profound, something that could change everything. Clara saw a glimmer of hope in David, a flicker of a man realizing he wasn't alone. They spent the next hour talking, exploring fears, dreams, and uncharted territories. The conversation flowed as freely as the coffee, touching on everything and anything, solidifying the connection forged between them. Just as the cafe began to fill with more customers, Clara noticed a shift in David. His burden didn't seem quite as heavy. For the first time, he wore a more open expression, happiness flickering beneath the concern he had worn like armor. I'll think about talking to Sarah, he promised, and Clara felt her heart lift. And I'll be right here cheering you on, she said, her smile unwavering. As the sun cast a golden glow across the cafe, Clara felt something shift inside her. It was as if they were both opening windows to their souls, letting in the light and fresh air. The connection had transformed from curiosity to friendship and perhaps something more. The next few days brought David back to the cafe frequently. Each time he seemed lighter, the weight on his shoulders visibly easing. They shared laughter and vulnerable moments, and with every encounter, Clara felt their bond deepen. One rainy afternoon, as they sat across from each other, he caught her gaze and said, "You've changed my perspective, Clara. Sometimes all it takes is one caring person to make a difference," she replied, her heart swelling. As he leaned in, searching her eyes, a moment crystallized into something bigger than both of them. The barrier that had initially separated them now felt like old news, a ghost of a past neither one wanted to revisit. Clara sensed the anticipation building as they both took a step closer, ready to embrace the unknown. And just like that, it changed. Their connection evolved into a promise, a commitment to navigate the messy, complicated journey of life together. Days blurred into weeks, and Clara found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. David still faced challenges with his family and the shadows from his past, but now they faced it together. Each small victory, each moment of honesty was cherished like a delicate thread weaving the fabric of their story. On one sunny afternoon, while seated on the cafe patio, Clara looked down at David's boots once more. The worn leather, once a mystery, now carried the stories of a shared journey. With each passing day, she learned more about him, and she could see the man he was becoming. "This," she whispered, pointing at his boots, "these carry us forward." David chuckled softly, warmth in his eyes. In that moment, amidst the hum of the cafe, they both knew the journey was just beginning. Life would throw challenges their way, but together they felt capable of facing whatever came next. They were no longer just strangers sharing fleeting smiles. They were allies ready to forge a path toward their destinies, boots firmly planted in the ground. With hope, love, and understanding, they stepped into the future together. She smiled at his boots, a pair that told stories under the layer of dust from the day's adventures. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, and the sun streamed through the cafe window, casting warm light on everything it touched. Emily had been working in Rosewood Cafe for nearly 2 years, but today something felt different. The man at the corner table was new, tall and rugged, with a presence that seemed to command the room, even from a distance. His leather boots had seen better days, but they held a raw charm that fascinated her. While other customers buzzed around, lost in their own worlds, he focused intently on a weathered notebook, pen dancing across the pages like he was engaged in an ancient ritual. As the clock ticked, Emily filled orders and stole glances, his brow furrowed in concentration, the light glinting off his dark hair. With each glance, a surprising thought crossed her mind. There was something about him she wanted to know, a puzzle she felt drawn to solve. It was a slow afternoon when Emily finally mustered the courage to approach him. The cafe filled with the soft hum of conversations, and she carefully placed his coffee on the table. He looked up surprised, and for a heartbeat their eyes locked. A spark ignited the air, brimming with unexpressed potential. She asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. He shook his head, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Nope, please sit." And just like that, a simple question ignited a conversation that would change everything. As they talked, a connection began to blossom between them. His name was Jack, and he spoke with a passion that pulled her in. Emily learned he was a writer, living in the area, chasing dreams and ideas that flowed from his heart. They shared stories, laughter, and glances charged with something more, like every moment mattered. But as days stretched into weeks, Emily began to notice a heaviness beneath Jack's bright exterior. There were moments when his smile faded, when shadows flickered in his eyes just before he turned back to his notebook. His laughter rang through the cafe, but in those quiet moments a different storm brewed just below the surface. One rainy Thursday, Clara, the cafe owner, mentioned that Jack had canceled his usual morning visit. The words felt like a punch to Emily's gut. She had grown fond of him and realized she had been waiting for him, eager to hear more of his stories. Mornings without Jack's presence felt like a cozy cafe without its warm coffee aroma. A nagging worry settled in her heart. When Jack finally returned the following week, something seemed different. He wore the same boots, but his shoulders slumped, and there was a tightness around his eyes, a burden he carried alone. Emily's heart ached to know what weighed him down. He paused, fingers drumming lightly on the table. "You know, just navigating life," he replied, glancing away as if he was still searching for an answer. "My mother used to say," Emily began, "that it's important to share our burdens." His gaze met hers, vulnerability flickering around the corners of his mouth. Just like that, the air grew heavy, thick with unspoken words. She wanted so desperately to reach out, but didn't want to pry. Instead, they shared stories of their pasts, their childhoods blending into one another like rivers merging. Emily felt a protective instinct brewing for him, as if a storm was building just beyond their little world. But she knew that was the only wall he wouldn't let her through, his past. Later that evening, Emily was cleaning up the cafe when something caught her eye. Jack's notebook lay abandoned on the table, pages fluttering in the breeze that curled through the door. Curiosity nipped at her heels. She picked it up, holding her breath, knowing she shouldn't, but yearning to understand the man whose boots had ignited so many connections. Gingerly, she flipped it open. Scribbles filled the pages, poems, fragments of stories, and the kind of raw emotion that made her pulse race. But it was the email tucked between the pages that stole her breath. She hesitated, heart racing, but an invisible force pushed her to unfold it. What she read sent chills down her spine. The email was from someone named Claire, dated just 2 days before. "Jack, I know you're struggling right now. I wish I could be there, but I can't. Please talk to me. You don't have to face this alone, and remember, I'm always here." Jack's troubles swirled in front of her like a storm cloud, his past intertwining with the present. She felt a pang of sorrow for the burdens he was carrying, a past intertwined with emotions yet to be laid bare. It felt wrong to invade this part of his world, but she couldn't shake the urge to reach out. The walls he built around himself were high, but she sensed that within those walls there were cracks that could be mended. The next day she arrived early, heart heavy with the weight of secrets. When Jack came through the door, she forced a smile, but her mind raced with thoughts of the email. She willed herself to stay casual, pouring his coffee as if nothing had changed. His eyes widened and a shadow crossed his features. A letter. The moment the words left her lips, she felt the air thrum with tension. She could see the defenses rising, but she pressed on. He rubbed a hand over his face, frustration mixing with relief. "I didn't mean for you to find that, it's all just." "It doesn't have to be," Emily replied, her voice gentle but firm. "You're carrying so much alone and it's okay to share." Jack glanced down, breath catching in his throat. "You don't know everything," he murmured, his voice breaking. "I made mistakes. I can't imagine what that feels like," she offered softly. "But you don't have to go through it alone." He looked at her, something raw and unfiltered shifting in his gaze. It was more than a promise, it was an invitation to take a step together into the uncertainty they both felt. At that moment, the dam broke. Jack leaned forward, his eyes glistening, the weight of emotions pouring forth. "I messed up with Claire. I let her down when she needed me most." Her heart ached for him, the realization dawning that he needed to break the cycle of loneliness. "It's never too late to reach out." He nodded, a flicker of vulnerability igniting. "I know I've got to talk to her." Let me help you start," Emily offered, her voice steady. "You can write her back." She watched as a battle silently raged within him, the uncertainty shifting like shadows across his face. He opened his notebook, poised to write, but hesitated. "I don't even know what to say," he admitted, frustration leaking into his voice. "Start with the truth," she suggested, leaning closer. "Just be honest with how you feel." He took a deep breath, determination settling in his bones. Slowly, words began to flow. Emily offered gentle encouragements, guiding him through each line, watching as he peeled back layers, showing a side of himself he had kept so carefully hidden. By the time he finished, the sun had dipped low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the cafe. Jack looked up, eyes shining with gratitude. "You did it yourself," she replied softly. She felt a mixture of joy and tenderness for him in that moment. They had traversed the echoes of his past, and now he was ready to move forward. The cafe felt different, alive with possibilities. Over the next few days, Jack started reaching out to Claire, their emails growing into a dialogue that helped him confront the past with strength. The heaviness that had clung to him was slowly lifting, the once dark clouds giving way to warmth and light. Emily watched as Jack blossomed, each step bringing him closer to the person he aspired to be. One evening they sat together, weary yet excited from their conversations. Jack glanced down at his boots and smiled. "You know, these old things have carried me through a lot. Because you're lighter," Emily said brightly, her heart swelling with pride. He met her gaze, the connection between them pulsing with unspoken potential. "And I have you to thank for that, Emily. Every journey needs a companion," she replied, feeling the warmth of their newfound bond. As weeks turned into months, balance began to settle into their lives. Jack and Emily continued building a friendship that felt both fragile and fierce, weaving dreams of the future into their shared moments. Conversations grew deeper, laughter intertwined with quiet confessions, pulses racing at the thought of what lay ahead. One day, while sipping coffee, Emily glanced at Jack, who was flipping through his notebook, laughing to himself when a new poem sprang to mind. She asked, a playful smirk on her face. "I think I just might have the beginnings of something good," he said, a mischievous light shining in his eyes. Her breath caught in her throat. He laughed. Clara appeared at their table, interrupting their moment. "You two are inseparable. It's like you're on your own little adventure," she teased. Emily felt her cheeks flush, realizing how true those words were. Jack's laughter rang through her heart like a sweet symphony. They were living, growing together in a beautiful harmony, and she found a gentle courage curling within her. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, casting a glow over Rosewood Cafe, Emily knew they were only at the beginning of their stories. Jack's journey had shifted, yet they were both still learning together. The connection forged through understanding, care, and vulnerability painted a picture of hope for both of them. Life's burdens may have brought them together, but the shared laughter and kindness kept them united. Clara's Cafe wasn't just a place of work for Emily anymore. It was where her heart had grown, where she embraced an unexpected friendship and a budding romance that felt like the beginning of a new chapter. And as they took on their paths, boots worn and hearts open, Emily couldn't help but smile, knowing that sometimes the simplest of moments could lead to the most extraordinary journeys. Together, they stepped into a future intertwined stronger than either had ever imagined. She smiled at his boots, the worn leather scuffed and faded from countless adventures. It was a chilly afternoon in October, a crispness in the air that hinted at winter's approach. Sarah sat at her usual table in the cafe, sipping her chai latte, lost in the pages of her book. Just out the corner of her eye, she noticed him, Ethan, sitting alone in the corner, scribbling in a notebook that seemed ancient, like it had traveled through time. The cafe was busy, filled with the hustle and bustle of daily life. But for Sarah, everything faded into the background. There was something about Ethan that pulled her in. Maybe it was the way he wore those boots with quiet confidence, or the way he lost himself in writing, as if the world around him disappeared. She often found herself wondering who he was and what stories he tucked away in those pages. As the clock ticked, she caught herself glancing his way more often. Was it just a curiosity or something deeper? Minutes later, he looked up and their eyes met. A flicker of surprise danced between them, and he smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. The warmth of that moment wrapped around her like a cozy blanket, stirring emotions deep within. The days turned into weeks, and Ethan became a regular fixture in her life. She would steal glances at him, pouring his heart into that notebook, feeling a strange sense of companionship even without words. She learned to recognize the way his brow furrowed with concentration and how a hint of a smile would appear whenever the words flowed freely. She was becoming part of his world without even stepping inside. One dreary afternoon, Sarah mustered up the courage to approach him. The cafe was quieter that day, the rain tapping gently against the glass, creating a soothing rhythm. She took a deep breath, grabbed her cup, and made her way to his table. She asked, unsure of her own resolve. Ethan looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Of course, she laughed, feeling the tension evaporate. Desperate, they slipped into conversation easily, like two rivers merging into one. As they shared stories, Sarah felt the air crackling with something electric, a connection growing stronger with each word exchanged. She learned that Ethan was an aspiring novelist, pouring himself into stories that came alive on the pages he fought to fill. But as the days passed, she sensed something lingering beneath Ethan's laughter. There were moments when his smile faltered, shadows crossing his eyes like dark clouds passing overhead. While their conversations sparkled with joy, there were hidden layers, a secret he seemed reluctant to share. One rainy evening, after a long day at work, Sarah noticed Ethan sitting alone, staring into his lukewarm coffee. The usual spark was dimmed, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Her heart ached for him, a sense of urgency tugging at her. "Hey," she said softly, sitting down across from him. He looked up, surprise flashing in his eyes, and then sighed, the weight of the world heavy on his shoulders. "Yeah, just thinking," he murmured, glancing down at the table. She pressed, wanting to peel back the layers. He said, almost more to himself than to her. The honesty in his voice struck her like a wave crashing on a shore. "You don't have to face it alone, you know. It's okay to talk about it." Ethan regarded her for a moment, his gaze lingering on her face as if searching for something. "I appreciate that," he said quietly. She nodded, understanding the hardness of the world pressing down on him. Life is messy, but sharing that mess can make it lighter. He smiled faintly, but there was a sadness in his eyes that made her chest tighten. She desperately wanted to help him to uncover the storm hidden beneath the calm. As weeks turned into months, Ethan continued to show up at the cafe, but the weight he carried seemed to grow heavier. Sarah often felt the difference, the tension hanging between them thickening like fog. She discovered that the more she wanted to reach out, the more he retreated. The cafe became their refuge, a space where conversations flickered like candle flames, warm but fleeting. Then one evening, while cleaning up, she noticed his notebook lying on the table. The pages were crammed with words, and curiosity gnawed at her insides. She picked it up hesitantly. It felt wrong to invade his privacy, but something pushed her forward. Flipping it open, she stumbled upon a printed email tucked inside a communication from someone named Rachel, dated just a week before. Holding her breath, she read the words that leaped off the page. "Ethan, please call me. I know things have been tough, but shutting me out isn't the solution. You don't have to navigate this alone. I'm here and I care." The words struck like lightning, illuminating shadows that hovered over Ethan's heart. She felt the rush of emotions flood through her, sorrow for the pain he was enduring, frustration that he wouldn't let anyone help. Guilt washed over her, yet a fire ignited inside. This was a deeper part of his life, a crack in the armor he wore so tightly. What had happened with Rachel? Who was she? As thoughts meandered through her mind, she knew she had to confront Ethan about it. The next day, her nerves twisted in her stomach as she approached him. "Ethan, I found something in your notebook." His face paled, surprise morphing into something darker, a mix of fear and resignation. "You shouldn't have looked," he breathed, almost a whisper. "Maybe not, but I'm your friend. You can't just shield yourself from everything," she pressed, her heart racing. He leaned back, frustration mingling with relief in his eyes. "It's complicated," he repeated, the heaviness settling on him once more. "Complicated is still worth discussing," she replied gently. "You opened up to me before. I'm here to help you sort through this." He scanned her face, searching for sincerity and finding it in her unwavering gaze. "Rachel and we were close, but things fell apart." Sarah swallowed hard, feeling her chest clench at the depth of his pain. "She wants to talk to you, though," he asked, vulnerability leaking through his voice. Sarah countered softly. "Sometimes addressing the past is the only way to move forward." Ethan fell silent, staring into the depths of his coffee cup. The weight of his emotions hung heavy in the air, but she sensed a shift, an opening, like a crack in the clouds that let sunlight stream through. As days passed, Sarah watched him grapple with the email, watching that storm within him swirl and subside. She stood alongside him, encouraging him to take the difficult steps toward confrontations he feared. One drizzly afternoon, she found him in the cafe, his fingers hovering over his phone, the email from Rachel glowing on the screen. "I can't do it," he whispered. "You can, just be honest," she urged, her heart urging him forward. He let out a shaky breath, and for a moment Sarah thought he might crumble. "The right words will come when you're ready," she reassured him. Time moved slowly as he captured a few deep breaths, and Sarah held her breath, leaning in with hope. After what felt like an eternity, with a shaky hand, Ethan hit send, and the tension around him seemed to fracture like glass. He looked up, eyes wide with a cocktail of fear and relief. "I actually did it," he said incredulously. "A small step, but a powerful one," Sarah smiled, her heart racing. The storm clouds above him began to fade, and as days melted into nights, the silence between them transformed into a growing bond. With each conversation, their connection deepened, not just as friends, but as soulmates navigating the complexities of life together. As weeks turned into months, Ethan's journey continued. He started communicating more openly, addressing the emotional whirlwind he had been wrestling with. The shadows that once haunted him began to loosen their grip, but one evening, just as he finished writing, the air was thick with unspoken emotions. Sarah sat across from him, searching for the right moment to say what had been on her mind. "Ethan," she began, her voice steady, "it's clear you've been through a lot." He looked up, and for a moment the world around them went quiet, as if the cafe held its breath. "You've changed everything," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just being honest," she said, her heart racing. His gaze held hers, searching for clarity. "I care about you, Ethan, more than just friends." He drew in a breath, hesitating, but there was a spark of hope in his eyes. "I've been scared to let anyone in but you." The moment hung in the air, bittersweet and charged, like a promise hanging just beyond the horizon. She could see it, the potential of something more, waiting to bloom. In the following weeks, their friendship transformed into a bond that played with the boundaries of love, two souls intertwining in a dance of healing and growth. They navigated laughter, shared stories, and found solace in each other's presence like a refuge from the world. As winter settled in, they both faced their own storms and welcomed one another into the quiet spaces of their hearts. The cafe, once a backdrop for their lonely moment, became a testament to shared struggles and growth, a sanctuary of resilience. One evening, seated together, they reflected on how far they had come. "You know," Ethan said, his fingers brushing against hers, "those boots I wear, they've seen some tough journeys." Sarah smiled softly, squeezing his hand. "It's not just the boots, it's you." In that moment, as laughter danced between them, Sarah realized that their journey was only beginning. Together, they would weather storms, share joys, and face whatever life threw their way. The past had carved its mark on Ethan, but now it was a tool for growth rather than a chain that held him back. With newfound strength and warmth of connection, they were ready to walk their paths side by side. Winter blankets enveloped the city, those humble boots would forge ahead, each step a testament to lessons learned, resilience found, and love blooming from the ashes of uncertainty. Together, they stepped into the unknown, boots firmly planted in the fabric of their burgeoning relationship, bound by stories, by challenges, and by a promise to always march forward, no matter the obstacles. And with hope in their hearts, they embraced what lay ahead, a tapestry woven from the delicate threads of healing and love. She smiled at his boots, worn and rugged, telling tales of travels both taken and yet to come. It was a rainy Thursday morning in the small town of Maplewood, where the streets gleamed damply beneath the overcast sky. Rose, sitting by the cafe window, sipped her coffee while watching the world outside. Her eyes kept drifting toward the man who had just walked in. He was tall, with tousled hair and a quiet confidence that intrigued her. As he settled into a corner table, Rose found herself caught somewhere between curiosity and admiration. His boots' brown leather, faded with wear, seemed to anchor him to the ground like ancient ships weathering the storm. She couldn't help but think they housed stories of adventures, whispered secrets only he could tell. But that was the mystery of it. Who was this man? What made him choose this little cafe on this dreary day, with all the cozy corners to sit alone? That thought nagged at her as she continued to enjoy her coffee, her heart racing a bit too fast for its own good. She watched him pull out a weathered notebook, its edges frayed as if it had seen too many nights under open stars. He flipped it open with a deliberate motion, pen poised above the page. Rose could see the words flowing from his pen like a river, pouring out thoughts and dreams. She felt an inexplicable urge to go speak to him, but the usual shyness tugged at her, keeping her glued to her seat. Moments turned into minutes as the cafe buzzed around her. She caught snippets of conversations, the clinking of cups, and the tranquil background music that created a comforting atmosphere. A familiar warmth spread through the cafe but contrasted sharply with the chill of her hesitation. With every tick of the clock, she felt the impulse to break through her shyness. Then, as if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met for the briefest moment-to-moment that felt electric. He smiled, a small upward curve of his lips that made her heart flutter. At that instant, she realized she wanted more than just a fleeting interaction. She wanted to know his story. After what felt like an eternity, Rose gathered her courage and stood up, heart pounding as she walked toward his table. His eyes followed her, curiosity piqued. His surprise morphed into a grin. "Not at all," he responded, inviting her in with a gesture. "Rose," she introduced herself, settling into the chair across from him. "I couldn't help but notice those boots of yours." Jacob chuckled, the sound warm and inviting. "You'd be surprised." Without realizing it, the cafe around them faded into the background. They fell into an easy conversation. Jacob spoke about hiking through national parks, camping under stars, and the stories behind those boots. Rose shared her own tales of travel, her laugh mingling with his, filling the space with a warmth that felt reassuring. As they talked, time flew by. Moments melted into one another, and what had begun as casual pleasantries transformed into something deeper. Rose found herself captivated by his passion for adventure, the way his eyes sparkled when he spoke of experiences that had shaped his life. Yet beneath the laughter, she sensed an undercurrent of something else, an unspoken sadness, a heaviness that occasionally shadowed his features. It was as if Jacob was carrying more than just the weight of his boots. There was something pressing down on his heart. The following weeks saw them meeting more frequently, each rendezvous a spark illuminating brighter than the last. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, revealing glimpses of their lives' childhood memories, hopes for the future, and dreams they both carried close. Rose felt the deepening bond, but she could also feel him pulling away at times, like a tide retracting from the shore. One particularly cloudy afternoon, while the rain drizzled softly against the windows, Rose noticed that Jacob seemed lost in thought. Despite their usual banter, an uncharacteristic silence hung over them. She leaned forward, trying to gauge what was troubling him. She asked gently, her voice steady. He hesitated, fingers tracing invisible patterns on the tabletop. "I've just been thinking a lot," he finally sighed, "about life choices," and Rose felt a tug at her heart, sensing the internal struggle swirling within him. "You know you can talk to me if you want," she offered, her sincerity clear in her voice. He looked at her, a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "It's complicated, Rose. Complicated is okay. We all have our stories," she replied softly, feeling an impulse to bridge the gap. The corners of his lips curled into a half-smile. But even as he said it, she could see the shadows still clinging to him. They continued to meet, and every time she could feel him fighting against the tide of his emotions. Then came the day that changed everything. One Saturday afternoon, while tidying up the cafe after closing, Rose noticed Jacob's notebook left behind on his usual table. The cover was worn, the pages filled with his handwriting. Despite the nagging voice warning her not to pry, curiosity overwhelmed her. Was she invading his privacy? Yes, but the need to understand him was stronger. She opened the notebook and began to read. The pages were filled with thoughts, ideas, snippets of stories, and sketches of places he dreamed of visiting. But as she flipped through, something caught her eye, a printed email tucked carefully between the pages. Her heart raced. She unfolded it, knowing it was wrong but feeling compelled to uncover what lay within. The email was from a woman named Claire. The date was recent, and as she read, every word reverberated through her mind. "Jacob, I'm worried about you. You've been distant, and I don't understand why. Please, we need to talk about everything that happened." She felt her heart drop. Suddenly, everything began to click into place. The heaviness that enveloped Jacob was no mere light burden. It was rooted in a past that haunted him. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened with Claire had left deep scars on his heart. Guilt washed over her, but more than that, a fierce desire to help him ignited within her. The quiet words clung to her thoughts. He doesn't have to face this alone. When Jacob returned later that day, she hid the notebook behind her back, her heart pounding. As she approached him, she sensed tension radiating from him. "Hey, you left your notebook here," she said, trying to keep her voice light. He visibly paled, eyes darting toward the table. I must have forgotten," he stammered, reaching for it. "Before you go, can we talk? I read something that really concerns me," Rose said, her voice steady. His expression shifted to one of uncertainty. She pressed. He fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air like thunderclouds ready to burst. She could see the storm brewing behind his eyes. Finally, he sighed, looking down at the table, its simplicity juxtaposed against the chaos swirling within him. "Claire was someone I deeply cared for," he admitted, voice barely a whisper. "Things didn't end well between us." She asked, heart aching for him. "I didn't want you to see me as flawed," he replied, the words coating the air with regret. Rose leaned in closer, looking directly into his eyes, willing him to see the truth. "We're all flawed, Jacob. It's what makes us human. I want to understand your pain, your struggles." With a heavy heart, Jacob finally began to share the details. He spoke of the love he once had for Claire, how it was filled with dreams and laughter, but then slowly deteriorated into unspoken words and unresolved feelings. He recounted arguments, misunderstandings, and the moments when they both chose silence over communication. As he spoke, Rose felt a wave of empathy wash over her. The darkness that had followed him began to lift, and she could see the man sitting before her was not just a heart divided. He was a soul navigating the complexities of life, yearning for understanding and compassion. "I didn't want to impose my past on you," he admitted. "No, it's not," she replied softly, reaching across the table to take his hand. In that moment, the energy between them shifted dramatically. It was no longer just a conversation, it was a catharsis. Each exchange peeled back layers of hurt, vulnerability mingling with strength. Days passed, and with them came more conversations, each one bringing a deeper understanding of each other. Jacob began to communicate with Claire, slowly breaking through the wall of silence that had trapped him for too long. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside the world grew brighter. There was laughter again, genuine and robust, and moments of silence that felt comforting rather than heavy. Jacob found himself letting go of the ghosts that clung to him, shedding layers as he healed. One day, as the cafe basked in the warmth of the afternoon sun, Rose found herself sitting across from Jacob, who looked more alive than ever. She smiled, her heart swelling with pride for him. Their friendship blossomed into something deeper, a connection forged from shared struggles, laughter, and a mutual understanding of life's unpredictability. They began exploring the world together, embarking on adventures that filled their hearts with joy. It became clear that their bond was formed from the ashes of Jacob's challenges, a unique tapestry woven from learned lessons and an unspoken promise to support one another moving forward. As they navigated the complexities of life hand in hand, the cafe transformed from a backdrop to a sanctuary where they learned to embrace vulnerability. One evening, while sharing a quiet moment, Jacob took her hand and said, "I never knew I could feel this way again." "You've taught me so much, Jacob," Rose replied, looking deeply into his eyes. And with that realization, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, they found themselves ready to step forward together. Their journey was no longer just his or hers. It was uniquely theirs, a path of healing and shared moments where the weight of the past was no longer a burden but a vital part of their story. As they continued to navigate the unfolding chapters of their lives, Sarah knew in her heart that this was only the beginning. Together, they would embrace whatever lay ahead, boots firmly planted, ready to march forward into a future filled with love, resilience, and hope. She smiled at his boots, the way they stood proudly on the worn wooden floor of the cafe, hinting at stories untold. The cafe, a cozy spot adorned with mismatched chairs and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, was rarely quiet, but on that particular afternoon, it felt as if time had paused just for her. Claire sat at a small table, engrossed in a book, when the door swung open with a creak and he walked in. His name was Noah, and he was tall, with tousled hair that looked like it had been sculpted by the wind. But it was his boots that instantly captured Claire's attention, big, rugged, and a bit scuffed, as if they had traversed countless miles. It was an unexpected allure that sparked an undeniable curiosity within her. Noah found a seat by the window, opening a notebook and hovering a pen over it, ready to capture thoughts as they spilled forth. Claire watched him from her corner, that magnetic energy pulling her closer, wanting to unlock the mystery that was Noah. What had those boots seen? What stories lay within those pages? Her heart raced as she considered approaching him. Moments passed, the soft chatter of the cafe fading into a backdrop. Claire's mind filled with scenarios of how a conversation might unfold. What if he smiled at her? What if they shared a laugh? What if her thoughts were abruptly interrupted when his gaze lifted and caught hers? Their eyes locked for a brief moment, a connection sparking between them. A flicker of surprise crossed Noah's face, followed by a warm smile that made Claire's heart flutter. "Hey," she said, her voice light yet nervous. "Thanks," he replied, a genuine grin brightening his features. They exchanged small talk like two dancers finding their rhythm. With each word shared, Claire felt the atmosphere around them dissolve into something intimate and electrifying. Noah spoke passionately about his love for hiking and the adventures he had embarked on. He painted pictures of vast mountain ranges, shimmering lakes, and starry nights spent under a canopy of infinite sky. Claire found herself hanging on every word, yearning to learn more about the man behind those captivating eyes. But as their conversation flowed, Claire noticed moments where Noah would pause, a shadow flickering across his expression as if he were weighing something heavy on his heart. It played like a soft undertone to an otherwise beautiful melody. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath the surface, an unseen battle he was fighting or a memory that haunted him. But for now, she let him talk about his adventures, allowing him the space to share what he was comfortable revealing. That day marked the start of a tentative friendship. They met at the cafe more frequently, each time building a fragile bridge over the unspoken gaps in their lives. Claire shared tales of her love for literature and art, the way words could paint vivid worlds, much like the adventures Noah described. Over those weeks, Claire learned to read Noah's expressions. She noticed the way his smile would falter when he spoke of his family, or how his eyes darkened when the conversation drifted too close to his past. It was as if he wore layers around his heart, thick and protective but still yearning for connection. On a rainy afternoon, not unlike the day they first met, Claire found herself leaning across the table, concern etched across her face. "You seem different today." There was a long pause. Noah stared out the window, the raindrops racing down the glass like the thoughts racing in his mind. "Sometimes," he finally replied, "I feel like I'm haunted by my past." She absorbed his words, feeling the weight in them. "You don't have to face it alone, you know." His eyes flickered back to hers, vulnerability breaking through the barriers he had erected. "I appreciate that, but..." Complications hung in the air like a storm brewing on the horizon. Claire wanted desperately to reach him, to break through the walls he had built around himself. But every time Noah spoke of his past, it was as if the space between them expanded while simultaneously binding them together in shared understanding. Then came the day that would forever change the course of their relationship. After closing time one evening, Claire was tidying up the cafe when she noticed Noah's notebook left behind. Curiosity nipped at her heels. Should she look? Part of her knew it wasn't right, yet another part felt compelled to understand him better. They had grown close and there were still so many unanswered questions. She picked up the notebook, its cover weathered and familiar like an old friend. Flipping it open, she scanned the pages filled with sketches and scribbled thoughts. It was a collection of dreams, fears, laughter, and moments that spoke volumes. Then halfway through, something caught her eye. A printed email slipped in between the pages. From the first few lines, Claire could tell it was from someone named Julia, dated only days before. "Noah," the email began, "I wish you would let me in. There's so much we need to discuss. I'm still here for you." A sharp gasp escaped her lips as the weight of the words reverberated through her mind. Who was Julia? What had happened? Her empathy morphed into urgency, and a wave of compassion crashed over her. Noah was wrestling with emotions and relationships beyond what she had ever imagined. It felt wrong to pry deeper, yet the urgency to help him was overwhelming. In that moment, she knew she couldn't let him continue to carry this burden alone. The next day, Claire's hands shook as she approached Noah at their usual corner table. "Hey," she started, feeling the tension spike between them. His expression shifted, a mix of surprise and unease flashing across his face. "Maybe not," she admitted, her voice steady despite her thudding heart, "but I'm worried about you." He hesitated, looking away, struggling with the weight of what was left unsaid. "It's complicated," he echoed, his voice low, sorrow lacing each word. "Complicated doesn't mean you need to face it alone," Claire urged, leaning closer. Noah glanced back, his gaze meeting hers, and in that moment Claire saw layers of pain bubbling just below the surface. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Julia and I had a history. We were close, but I messed up," she asked gently. He swallowed hard, eyes glistening as he struggled to articulate the depth of his feelings. "I pushed her away after my father got sick. I thought isolating myself would make it easier." The honesty resonated deeply with Claire. "I understand that all too well," she replied, her voice softening. "But shutting people out doesn't help in the long run." He looked at her, a flicker of hope dancing in his eyes. "No, I don't," Claire replied. Noah took a deep breath, wrestling with the weight of her words. "It's just scary," he admitted. "Failure is part of life," she said, her heart aching for him. "But it's also how we learn and grow." Silence between them felt heavy, filled with a mixture of fear and hope. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Noah nodded. "I'll think about it," he said, determination showing in the lines of his face. As their conversation continued, Claire watched as he began to unlock the door to his heart. They spent hours talking about everything, the past, the future, dreams, fears. She listened as he recounted memories of Julia, the laughter, the joy they shared, and the moments that became overshadowed by regret. With each revelation, the burden he carried began to lighten. Noah opened up in ways he hadn't allowed himself to before, and with that release came a sense of clarity. He had been carrying the weight of the world, his past, his family, his mistakes, all by himself for too long. Days morphed into weeks as he began to communicate with Julia, slowly breaking through the silence that had kept them apart. Every small victory felt monumental, like a step toward liberation from the pain that had once held him captive. Claire found herself by his side throughout every interaction, providing support, encouragement, and understanding. She watched as Noah found a new cadence in his life, a rhythm that allowed him to face the past without fear. Little by little, the light began to seep back into his eyes, illuminating the shadows that had lingered for too long. One crisp evening, sitting across from each other in their favorite cafe, Noah shared the latest developments. "I talked to Julia," he said, a sudden brightness illuminating his features. The words sank in like a gentle breeze, and Claire felt pride swell in her heart. She exclaimed, "Thank you for pushing me," he said, sincerity washing over him. Their gazes locked, and in that moment Claire felt the electric charge between them, a connection that transcended friendship. It wasn't just about the boots or the adventures anymore. It was about forging a path together through the complexities of life. As winter melted into spring, the cafe became their sanctuary, the place where they confronted their struggles, shared laughter, and learned to let love bloom. They continued to explore the depths of their emotions, supporting one another as they navigated the intricacies of their ever-changing lives. One afternoon, the sun poured through the windows, warming the air. Noah took a deep breath, looking at Claire with a newfound confidence. Her heart raced as she heard those words, a sense of deep relief flooding through her. She asked, captivated by the journey he had undertaken. "It means facing Julia and finding closure," he said. "And to new beginnings," Claire added softly, her heart swelling with understanding. He reached out, taking her hand in his, fingers interlacing together like promises shared. "I want you to be part of that journey." In that moment, everything felt right. The burden of the past began to lift as they stepped into a future filled with possibilities. They faced the world together, boots firmly planted, hearts open wide to embrace whatever came next. As the cafe bustled around them, Claire realized she had found more than just a friendship in Noah. She had unearthed a connection that felt real and profound, a bond built on trust, vulnerability, and shared struggles. In those moments, they forged a path forward, a journey not only of healing but of new beginnings. The clouds of uncertainty began to dissipate, revealing a brighter horizon filled with hope and adventure. And so they set forth together, navigating the complexities of life side by side, writing their own story filled with love, resilience, and the promise of brighter tomorrows. With those worn boots carrying their memories and dreams, they marched onward into the future, ready to face whatever lay ahead together. She smiled at his boots, their scuffed leather worn from countless journeys. It was an unusually warm autumn afternoon in the town of Willow Creek, with leaves crunching underfoot and the golden sun casting a warm glow over everything. Sarah sat at her favorite cafe, the Cozy Nook, sipping a steaming cup of chai latte. She had just settled in with her book when he walked in. He was tall, with dark hair tousled just so, and an air of quiet confidence that drew her attention like a moth to a flame. Those boots had clearly explored more than just the sidewalks of Willow Creek. As he moved deeper into the cafe, Sarah's heart raced. He found a seat by the window, pulling out a notebook and pen as he settled in. With each stroke of the pen, it was as if he was weaving magic on the page. Sarah stole glances, captivated by the way he lost himself in his own world, a world she was desperate to slip into. She imagined the stories hidden beneath the surface of those boots, the mountains he must have climbed, the roads he had traveled, and the people he had met along the way. As she watched him, an unexpected urge began to bubble up inside her. She wanted to know him, to ask him about those adventures, to uncover the mysteries behind those eyes. But shyness clenched her heart like a vice, leaving her rooted to her spot. Just then his gaze lifted and their eyes met. For a brief, electrifying moment, she thought she saw a flicker of interest in his expression. Smiling, she took a chance, gathering her courage. "Those are some impressive boots," she called out, her voice surprising even herself with its steadiness. He looked up, genuine surprise dancing in his eyes. He replied with a grin that made her heart skip a beat. A moment of silence settled between them, charged with possibility. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her, as if his smile wrapped around her like a cozy blanket. "I can only imagine the adventures they've been on," she said, trying to keep the conversation alive. He chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair. "You wouldn't believe some of the places they've taken me," she exclaimed, leaning forward. "I've always wanted to try that," and just like that, the conversation flowed. Words danced between them like fireflies on a summer night. He told her stories of breathtaking views and camping under the stars, of moments that made him feel alive and connected to something greater. She shared her own dreams of travel and exploration, feeling an undeniable bond with him grow with each passing second. But as the conversation warmed, she noticed something flicker in his eyes, a shadow that seemed to momentarily break through his sunny disposition. It didn't go unnoticed. A sense of urgency tugged at her heart. What was he hiding behind that charm? Days turned into weeks, and Sarah found herself anticipating each visit to the Cozy Nook, her heart fluttering when she saw his boots stride through the door. Their exchanges grew deeper as they unraveled stories wrapped in laughter and hope. They talked about their dreams, their fears, and the challenges life threw their way. Yet every so often he would gaze off into the distance, as if lost in some painful memory. She longed to delve into those shadows, to understand what made the man in front of her so compelling yet so troubled. One rainy evening, after a particularly moving conversation about their families, Sarah decided it was finally time to break through the barrier that separated them. She said gently, sensing an opening. His expression shifted, a flicker of hesitation flashing across his face. "I appreciate that, it's just, sometimes it helps just to let it out. You don't have to face things alone," she urged, feeling the distance between them grow heavier. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated," he whispered, staring at the tabletop. "Complicated is okay," she said softly, leaning closer. "Life is messy, and being vulnerable is part of it." He looked up, searching her eyes, and she felt a glimmer of hope. "I just don't want to burden you," he finally admitted, a vulnerability creeping into his voice. "Let me decide if it's a burden. You matter, and what you're feeling matters," she reassured him, her heart aching with compassion. But Noah simply smiled sadly and switched the topic back to something lighter, leaving Claire feeling like she had been brushed aside. She could only watch as the walls he had built stood tall and unyielding, a structure of pain and echoes from his past that loomed over them. Then came the day that would change everything. It was a quiet evening after the cafe had closed. Sarah was tidying up when she spotted Noah's notebook left behind. Her heart raced. Should she look? It felt wrong, yet the urge to discover what lay beneath those pages was irresistible. As she picked it up, she hesitated. What if it revealed more of his struggles? But her curiosity won out and she opened it, flipping through the pages filled with sketches and writings, dreams, stories, and thoughts poured out in a whirlwind of emotion. Then something caught her eye, a printed email tucked between the pages. Her breath caught in her throat as she unfolded it. As she read, a rush of emotions surged through her. The email was from a woman named Lily, dated just a few days prior. "No, I can't keep doing this. It's time we face what happened. I miss you." Her heart sank, a wave of realization crashing over her. So that was it, the source of his burden. The words echoed in her mind, feeling like a fateful call to action. Noah was wrestling with something far more significant than she had imagined. Her heart ached for him, and a fierce determination ignited within. He didn't have to face this alone. She felt a longing to reach out, to break through the clouds of uncertainty that surrounded them both. The next day, Sarah arrived at the cozy nook early, her heart pounding as she spotted Noah seated at their table. She felt a mixture of urgency and anxiety. His expression shifted, panic mingling with guilt. "You shouldn't have looked at that," he said, voice strained. "Sorry," she rushed, her heart racing. "But I saw the email. You need to talk about this. It's okay to have feelings about what happened." His gaze fell to the table and she could see the turmoil churning inside him. "It's just hard to navigate all of this," he murmured, scratching his neck as if to fend off the weight upon his shoulders. "Lily and we went through so much together." She reached across the table, taking his hand gently. "It's part of healing, Noah, facing what's been holding you back. Letting go of the past doesn't mean forgetting it." For a moment, silence enveloped them, heavy and charged. She felt a glimmer of hope as she caught his eye. I don't want to hurt anyone," he finally admitted, a tear glistening in his eye. "It's okay to be scared," she replied softly, "but if you don't face it, it will keep haunting you." He breathed deeply, visibly wrestling with the emotions surfacing within him. "I need to reach out to her," he finally said, a spark of determination igniting in his voice. "Yes, that's a huge step," she encouraged, feeling her heart swell with pride. "You can do this, Noah." As he pulled out his phone, he hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. "Then you'll figure it out together," Sarah assured him. After several deep breaths, he hit send, visibly tense as they waited for a response. The seconds felt like hours, and Sarah could feel the tension radiating from him. Then his phone buzzed, a message lighting up the screen. He looked down, heart racing. "She replied," he said, almost in disbelief. A flood of relief washed over him, but the uncertainty still lingered. "Thank you," he whispered, looking up at her, gratitude filling his gaze. "You found the strength within yourself," Sarah replied, squeezing his hand. In the following weeks, they navigated the ups and downs together. Noah met with Lily, and Sarah offered support as he confronted his feelings about their relationship, the love they had shared, and the pain that had driven them apart. Each conversation felt like a step toward liberation, a journey of growth that left them both feeling lighter. The edits of his past transformed from haunting memories to lessons learned, something that shaped him into the man he was becoming. One evening, as they sat in their usual spot at the cozy nook, Noah looked across the table, his expression filled with warmth. "I never thought I could move on from what happened." "That's the power of vulnerability," Claire replied, her heart full. He smiled brightly, and the connection between them deepened. New challenges awaited, but they felt ready, both equipped with love and support as their guiding lights. As months passed, they explored their relationship alongside their individual journeys, continuing to share moments of joy and laughter. They traveled together, hiked along beautiful trails, and experienced life in new ways, hand in hand. One crisp fall day, while walking through a park blanketed in golden leaves, Noah turned to Claire with an earnest expression. "I just gave you a nudge," she replied with a wink. "I wouldn't have done it without you, so thank you," he said, pulling her closer as they continued their walk. Their laughter echoed through the trees, a sound of freedom and connection. As they strolled, Claire felt a sense of belonging wash over her, bond crafted from understanding, compassion, and a shared journey of healing. From the moment she had smiled at those boots, a door had opened to a world filled with adventure, vulnerability, and love. Together they had faced shadows and emerged into a light brighter than either had deemed possible. Standing amidst the swirling autumn leaves, Sarah realized they were only just beginning to write their story, each day a new page filled with the ink of love and the promise of brighter tomorrows. With every step forward, side by side, they forged a path toward a future alive with possibilities, ready to tackle whatever life threw their way, boots firmly planted in the ground. She smiled at his boots, the way they stood in the sunlight that filtered through the cafe window, reflecting shades of brown that whispered of adventures yet to come. Amelia had come to the corner cafe every Saturday for months, finding solace in its cozy corners and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. But this Saturday felt different, electric in the air, as if the universe had conspired to bring change. When he walked in, the whole room seemed to tilt. Jack, he said his name was, with tousled hair and an easy smile that could light up the dullest day. His boots were rugged, worn to perfection. As he made his way to a table near the back, something stirred deep within Amelia. Curiosity mingled with a longing to know more about the man behind those captivating boots. Time seemed to slow as she watched him pull out a notebook and a pen. He flipped it open and began to write, his forehead furrowing in concentration, completely absorbed in his craft. What was he writing? What stories lay trapped within those pages? Was he an artist, a poet, or perhaps a dreamer, someone who thrived on the possibilities life held? The questions tumbled through her mind, each one pulling her closer to him, pulling her closer to some untapped adventure. Suddenly he looked up and caught her gaze. For a split second their eyes locked, and she felt a rush of warmth surge through her, an unexplainable connection that danced between them like fireflies on a summer night. A shy smile crept across his face, and Amelia felt the edges of her world sharpen. She asked, standing up and gripping her coffee cup tightly, heart racing. "Nope," he replied, gesturing to the chair opposite him. As she sat down, a swirl of nerves and excitement mingled in her stomach. "I couldn't help but notice your boots," she began, trying to keep her voice steady. Jack chuckled, his eyes sparkling. "They've definitely been through some things." "Really?" Amelia leaned forward, drawn in. He laughed, a warm sound that made her heart flutter. It was breathtaking. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, starting with the beauty of nature and branching into their favorite places, music, and little quirks of life. For a moment, everything outside faded into a blur. They shared stories, laughter, and glances charged with emotion, the bond between them tightening with every word spoken. But then, just as she was beginning to feel truly connected, Amelia noticed a flicker in his expression. A shadow passed over Jack's face, a fleeting moment where the joy disappeared, replaced by something deep, something troubling. Amelia asked, genuine concern creeping into her voice. Jack hesitated. "It's nothing really," he replied, but she could hear the strain in his tone. "Come on," she pressed gently. "We've just shared adventures." He looked at her, his brow furrowed, as if considering whether he could trust her with whatever burden lay hidden beneath his cheerful exterior. "It's just complicated," he said finally, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. Amelia felt a sharp tug at her heart. She wanted to dive deeper, to peel back the layers he had wrapped around himself, but he seemed reluctant to share. Instead, they floated back into safe territory, discussing favorite novels, music they both loved, and the little joys that breathed life into their everyday routines. This became their pattern. They met every Saturday, their friendship blooming like the spring flowers outside the cafe, but Jack continued to wear a mask. There were moments when she could see the shadows flit across his features, a heaviness that darkened his eyes, and those moments weighed heavily in the air between them. Weeks passed, each Saturday finding them at their usual table where they would sip coffee and share stories. Amelia cherished every moment. She waited for him, her heart racing in anticipation, yet each conversation crested over an uncharted territory still unexplored. Then one rainy afternoon, while the world outside melded into a blur of gray, she found herself sitting alone, feeling a wave of impatience wash over her. Jack was late, and her thoughts wandered to the possibility that maybe she had misread their connection. Just then the bell over the cafe door jingled, cutting through her thoughts. Jack entered, drenched but smiling, water dripping from his hair and clothes. "Sorry I'm late," he laughed, shaking his head. Relief washed over her. "It's okay," he replied, plopping into the chair across from her. They exchanged playful banter, but something felt different. The shadows danced more clearly across his face, and Amelia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had to know what was happening beneath the surface. As time went on, she decided to take action. One day, as they parted ways, Amelia spotted Jack's notebook left behind at the cafe. Her heart raced. She couldn't resist. She flipped it open, curiosity bubbling to the surface as she scanned the pages. What she found was a mixture of poetry drafted in jagged handwriting and snippets of ideas that carved into her mind. But it was an email, slipped between the pages, that made her breath hitch. "Jack," it read, "I miss you. We need to talk about what happened." The blood drained from her face. Jack had been carrying the weight of something heavy, and now she understood why. It was like a thunderstorm looming just out of sight, a tempest of emotion that was begging to be unleashed. When Jack arrived again the following week, her heart raced with anticipation. She wanted to confront him about the email, but hesitated. Had she invaded his privacy? Should she say something? "Amelia," he greeted her, his smile lighting up the room, but only slightly reaching his eyes. "Good, mostly just busy," she replied, taking a deep breath. His expression hardened, eyebrows knitting together. "The email," she said, watching as his body stiffened in response. He sighed deeply, the weight of the world seemingly crashing down at that moment. She pressed gently. "It's complicated," he repeated, his voice strained. "Lily and I had something special, but I messed it up." "You have to talk to her," Amelia urged, feelings a whirlwind inside her. "You can't keep running from your past. Ignoring it won't fix anything." He asked, his eyes searching hers. "I do, it's part of moving forward," she said firmly. The cafe buzzed around them, but it felt like the world had closed in as they held each other's gaze. Jack took a deep, shuddering breath. "I do, face it, find your truth," she encouraged, her heart pounding in her chest. After a long pause, a flicker of resolve ignited in Jack's eyes. Okay, I'll email her. Then you deal with that when it comes, she reassured him, squeezing his hand softly as she tried to steady her own racing heart. But don't run away from it. And so the moment had cemented itself in time, a moment that would ripple through their lives. Jack sent the email, and a surge of anticipation hung in the air as they waited for a response. But in the days that followed, a tension hung over them. Jack seemed more withdrawn, the weight of uncertainty thickening the atmosphere between them. Amelia wished desperately for him to find peace, for the shadows haunting him to dissipate. Then one evening, just as the twilight embraced the world outside, Jack met her at their table. His face was pale, his eyes glassy. She responded, he said, voice trembling slightly. The air grew thick with tension, and Amelia held her breath as he continued. Good, she said, hoping to instill some strength in him. Yes, but I also told her I would tell her everything, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Her heart sank. He nodded, the fear clear in his expression. It became apparent then that the conversation he was about to have wasn't just a simple meeting. It was the potential for closure, but also for heartache. Jack asked, his vulnerability piercing through the air. Then you'll have to find a way to heal, Amelia said gently, the weight of her own emotions swirling within her. Jack inhaled sharply, realizing the weight of what lay ahead. And just then, the cafe door swung open, a gust of wind carrying the scent of rain inside. I should go, he said, standing up, his resolve faltering slightly. Amelia called out, a rush of urgency filling her voice. Whatever happens, know that I'm here for you. He paused, and for a fleeting moment she saw the fear melt away, replaced by something deeper. Thank you, Amelia. As he walked away, Amelia glanced at the door, heart racing with worry, hope, and anticipation. She knew in her gut that the next day would change everything, one way or another. And little did she know, waiting for Jack as the sun dipped below the horizon, the real storm was just beginning. Would he find the courage to face the ghosts of his past? And would the aftermath strengthen the bond they had built? Or would the truth unravel everything, leaving them both adrift in a sea of uncertainty? Only time would tell, but that waiting moment was the calm before an inevitable storm, and Amelia could feel the winds beginning to howl.